plan. Politics have always been about choices. Some choices inspire confidence, some choices spark debate, and then there are choices that leave millions of Americans wondering whether common sense has quietly packed its bags and moved somewhere far away. Tonight's commentary is one of those choices. I call it the Minnesota Checkmate. Now, before anybody reaches for an outrage button, let's establish the facts. In June, Minnesota three-member Board of Pardon, Governor Tim Walz, Attorney General Keith Ellison, and Minnesota Supreme Court Chief Justice Natalie Hudson unanimously approved a pardon for Tu Lu Vang, a Laotian national who had pled guilty in 2005 to first-degree criminal sexual conduct involving repeat sexual abuse of a 10-year-old girl. According to public reporting, the board considered the evidence of rehabilitation, Vang's expression of remorse, and a letter from the victim supporting the pardon. Those are the facts. Now, let's talk about the judgment, because this wasn't someone convicted of writing a bad check. This wasn't someone convicted of a non-violent offense decades ago. This was a man convicted of repeatedly sexually assaulting a 10-year-old child. And Governor Tim Walz looked at the case and decided a pardon was appropriate. That decision deserves scrutiny. Supporters of the pardon argue our justice system should recognize rehabilitation and, in this case, the victim's forgiveness. That is a legitimate point of view, but government has another responsibility. Government is in charge with protecting the public and maintaining confidence in the justice system. Many Americans believe some crimes are so horrific that extraordinary caution, not extraordinary mercy, should guide any decision involving executive clemency. Apparently, Governor Walz saw that differently. Now here's where the story took another turn. Last week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that the federal government had revoked Vang's legal status. Federal authorities subsequently took him into custody and he was formally removed from the United States. Think about that for a moment. One level of government concluded that this individual deserves a pardon. Another level of government concluded he should no longer remain in the country. If that doesn't illustrate two completely different philosophies of justice and immigration, nothing does. And here's the sarcasm. Minnesota leaders essentially looked at one of the most disturbing criminal cases imaginable and said, let's give him another chance. The federal government looked at the very same individual and said, we're removing him. That's not merely a disagreement, that's a collision of governing philosophies. Governor Walz has often spoke about compassion. Compassion is admirable quality, but compassion without careful judgment can quickly become a political liability, because compassion towards a convicted child predator is not viewed by many citizens the same way as compassion towards someone who made a youthful mistake or committed a minor offense. There is a difference, and a profound difference. Now let's be equally clear. A pardon does not erase history. It doesn't declare the crime never happened, and it doesn't automatically prevent every possible federal immigration action. Federal immigration authorities ultimately reset the federal government, which is precisely why Secretary Rubio's action superseded the practical effect many believe the pardon might have been had. But politically, Governor Walz has already made his own move. And in politics, perception often matters just as much as the procedure. Imagine trying to explain this decision to a parent across Minnesota. Imagine telling them that the state believed that clemency was appropriate in cases involving repeated sexual abuse of a 10-year-old child. That's not an easy conversation. In fact, it's probably one of the most difficult political decisions to defend. Supporters of Governor Walz will argue that every application deserves an individualized review and that rehabilitation should matter. Critics will argue that there must also be limits, that some offenses are so grave that executive clemency should be granted only under the most extraordinary circumstances, if at all. That debate is now part of Minnesota's political landscape, and that's why I call it the Minnesota Checkmate. Because regardless of where somebody stands politically, this decision handed Governor Walz's critics a powerful talking point, not because of the campaign slogan, not because of a partisan rhetoric, but because the underlying facts are difficult to ignore. Politics is often compared to the game of chess. Every move carries a consequence. Some moves strengthen your position, others expose vulnerabilities. Whether Governor Walz believed this pardon reflect mercy, fairness, or rehabilitation, many Minnesotans and Americans will judge it very differently. They will ask a simple question. Was this really the case in which executive clemency should have been exercised? That question will likely outlast the headlines, because while the federal government ultimately recovered Tu Lu Vang from the United States, the political consequences of the board decision remain. Sometimes one decision defines an entire debate. Sometimes one decision becomes the move everybody remembers. And for Governor Tim Walz, this may have been one of those moments. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, senior correspondent for Englebrook Independent News. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.